going on? Welcome to the Raptors Weekly Extra Podcast, your very last Raptors Weekly Extra Podcast, talking about preseason basketball. That's right. This time next week, we'll have one regular season game to talk about as the Toronto Raptors open their season on Wednesday, October 26th at home against the Detroit Pistons, who they just beat pretty comfortably on Wednesday in their second last preseason game. I'm your host, Blake Murphy. I was joined by William Liu. Unfortunately, I'm on the road. Will was doing the backup recording. It didn't work. We only got Will's audio. I figured you guys didn't want to hear Will talk to himself. Luckily, earlier in the week, we recorded a second segment with Eric Koreen of The Athletic. He was great. It ran a little over 20 minutes, so at least we've been able to salvage that and give you a very short Friday podcast. My apologies is not longer. Will's apologies is not longer. You mostly missed us talking about Wednesday's game, which if you need to catch up on, you can check Will's post-game reaction podcast. We talked a little bit about the injuries to Jared Sullinger and Terrence Ross, why you shouldn't be worried, why it makes sense that the team is playing it cautious with those injuries. Stuff that you've read on our site already, we were just kind of rehashing because, hey, the preseason's way too long, and thankfully it's almost over. We also talked a little bit about Lucas Nogueira. It does seem like he's locked up the backup center job. It does seem reasonable to not only give him a chance because of the talent level he brings to the table and some of the skill set that he has, but also because Jakob Poeltl, while he's come along pretty quickly in terms of the game slowing down for him in the preseason, while he showed some really nice flashes, is only turning 20 like this week, I think, and expecting much from a 20-year-old big man not named Karl Anthony Towns is a little bit much. So, the nice thing here is that Nogueira's in his third year. He's played at a high level in Spain. He's shown you enough in the preseason that you can comfortably slot him in for backup center minutes, maybe splitting those minutes with Jared Sullinger, and that gives you the freedom to bring Poeltl along a little slower, whether that's in the D-League, whether for the first month of the season before the D-League gets going. That's with 3 and 4 and 5 minute stretches at the end of games that allow for it. I don't think it's a bad thing at all to be in a position where you can bring your rookie along slowly, even a number 9 pick, because again, you're a 56-win team, and expecting the number 9 pick to come in, even in a good draft class, which, there's debate about that, even with kind of not a can't-fail prospect, but a guy that most people believe is at least going to be a quality backup like Poeltl. It's always better to have the option to play these things a little more slowly. The Raptors seem like they're going to do that, and Nogueira's done nothing to lose the job. It's also been nice to see him stay healthy. One of the knocks on him sometimes is that every time he's gotten a little bit of momentum or had an opportunity, a hamstring issue or an ankle issue or something else issue has popped up and kind of limited his progress. He's gotten through preseason healthy. He got through the offseason healthy. That alone is encouraging. Will and I also talked a little bit about Nogueira from a personality perspective. That's rather than rehash that in a second here, I think I'd rather just make that a topic for another time. There was a great quote from Nogueira this week that we got in a scrum about balancing his happy-go-lucky attitude with a focus on the court. And I think it's important sometimes that, people who see Nogueira smiling or laughing or joking around after games or posting silly Instagram stories don't lose sight of the fact that in life it is possible to be that kind of happy person while also focusing on your job and doing a good job and working hard. Maybe that's not the case for everyone, and that's totally fair and understandable. Work-life balance is a tough thing. But in the case of Nogueira, until this year, he gives you a reason to suspect he hasn't been putting in the work and, his focus isn't there. Maybe don't write him off just because he's having some fun on Instagram, although he should probably curb the use of curse words on there, just, out of self-interest. So yeah, Nogueira is the backup center. It looks like DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry are very, very, very ready for the start of the NBA season. Corey Joseph's jump shot looks great. Eric and I are going to talk a little bit about the 15th man competition. We're going to talk a little bit about Terrence Ross and Norman Powell. We're going to talk a little bit about the new venture that Eric's a part of at The Athletic. Before we get to that, a quick reminder that the podcast is brought to you by Athletes Collective. If you go to athletescollective.com and use the promo code Raptors at your checkout, you'll receive 15% off your first order. You should do that because not only is it premium sportswear at a really good price, the fact that it is Canadian made, Canadian designed, shipped for free with free returns all across Canada, 100% satisfaction guaranteed, and most importantly, it's in Canadian dollars on the website. So, you're getting this stuff at the premium level of other major brands, but you're not paying for shipping, and you're not paying for the brand name, and you're not paying for the exchange rate. So, a $30 shirt is a $30 shirt, not a $50 shirt after checkout. It supports Raptors Republic. It supports local. It's great stuff. Honestly, I've been wearing it for basketball, for runs, for yoga, just to the gym. It's comfortable. It looks good. You can, mix and match brands with it because it's logo free. It's really great stuff. And honestly, the fact that it's locally made and designed and it's an entirely local product is just, it's so cool to see a small Toronto company on the come up like that. And go to athletescollective.com and use that promo code Raptors. You get good stuff at a discounted price. You support local. You support Raptors Republic. So please do that. And thank you to Athletes Collective for sponsoring the podcast. Once again, we'll be right back in like 10 seconds with Eric Koreen, no longer of just the internet, Eric Koreen of The Athletic Toronto. Welcome back to the Raptors Weekly Extra Podcast. I'm still your host, Blake Murphy. I'm joined by a very special guest, my tag team partner in a group known as the Reasonablists, Eric Koreen. Eric, how's it going, buddy?
It's going well, man. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thank you very much for coming on. I normally would have introduced you as Eric Koreen from the National Post or Eric Koreen from the internet, as you have started to call yourself, but that's no longer true. You have a new home. What is it, and why should we be very excited for your new home?
Well, it's still on the internet, so technically it is still Eric Koreen of the internet. But yes, I'm, as of, 10 days ago now? 7 days ago? I am writing at The Athletic Toronto. It's a subscription sports site. They started in Chicago, a locally focused sort of branch of it started in Chicago at the beginning of the year. They're looking to expand and have expanded into Toronto. I'll try to save my spiel of why it's sort of important to support journalism and content that you care about. We all have heard that, and we all know that the landscape is changing and there have to be sort of new models to prop up and support the work, the very real work that goes into those things. All I can say is we're trying at The Athletic to be thoughtful and in-depth and a bit irreverent, and we have guys like David Alter and John Lott and more coming, people with experience and the know-how to produce several different types of stories or content or whatever you want. We're going to be, I hope and I think, adding to that staff and trying to be as intelligent and, if you will, as reasonable as possible as we grow and build. So I'm excited about it. I hope that everybody else who's read so far, and thank you if you have read, is excited about it. It's a money is a tricky thing. It's not that much money. I think it could work into most people's budgets, but I don't want to speak for anybody. But if you're into Toronto sports, I think it's a pretty solid investment to make.
Yeah, for sure. It works out, if you get a year subscription, it works out to $4.17 Canadian a month. If you go month by month, it's $7 a month. So it's pretty reasonable. Not only do you get Eric Koreen on the Toronto Raptors beat, you'll get me once in a while. I'm part-time joining the team. Far more important than that, though, you mentioned David Alter. Him and Josh Cloak are doing great work on the Leafs side. And then John Lott is just, like, the best for Blue Jays coverage.
When I grow up, I want to be John Lott, I think.
Yeah, it'd be great. I need to get a camera first.
Yeah.
I don't know how someone's that good at, like, covering a beat and also as a photographer. It's not really all that fair.
Yeah. I was listening to Jonah Carey's podcast with Bruce Arthur the other day, and he mentioned, like, how does somebody get that skill set? Like, how does somebody so sharp as a writer and also become an amazing this photographer? Like, the stuff he gets from a press box, we should all be able to get that shot from, right up close. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, my fuzzy iPhone camera is not doing that from the Foster Hewitt Media Gondola at the Air Canada Centre somehow.
No?
No, it's not doing it.
It must be a flaw of your own. I would internalize that.
No, I was going to blame it on the equipment. I'm going to go with the fundamental attribution error here, and, it's not my fault.
It's the shoddy craftsman that blames his equipment, Blake.
Yeah. Speaking of shoddy craft, we are going to get some of your takes on the Raptors ahead of the season. We are recording this on Wednesday afternoon, so we do not have the benefit of the Raptors-Pistons game from Wednesday night, which at this point we don't even know if we're going to be able to get anyway. Neither side is televising it, so crossing our fingers that it'll be the dead stadium feed for League Pass. So this analysis will not include anything from that game. But Eric, entering the season, I have an idea how you feel in general, being as you are one of the Reasonablists. What is your take on the temperature of the team, the kind of the emotion or the narrative around camp? Where are you feeling with this team? And by God, are you ready for the season to start already?
Yes, the season should start, last week. I think everybody's ready for the season to start except for Dwayne Casey, who would prefer 4 more weeks or 2 more years or 5 more years to tune things up. I'm ready. I'm not sure why we haven't scaled back a week at least in training camp or preseason and added it to the regular season in terms of days by now. But, whatever. What I think about the team, it's tough to say. I'm not a big believer in preseason as something that can provide much insight. I remember this must have been 4 or 5 years ago. It was the first Kyle Lowry season, so 2012, 2013, and John Lucas was playing so well that they were the prevailing narrative was how are they going to get minutes for John Lucas and Kyle Lowry and Jose Calderon, and how many times have you thought about, John Lucas, hell of a dude, but how many times have you thought about him as a player in the, last 3 years?
Yeah, John Lucas, I'm sure he's going to get a 10-day with the Pistons at some point this year because that's what he does. The Pistons, or I guess now with Tibbs in Minnesota, maybe it'll be Minnesota.
Yeah, the point is, they're sure, Terrence Ross, before he hurt himself doing a 360, which, by the way, could have happened in a layup line of the game. So I think us freaking out about, immature Terrence does immature thing is a bit overblown. But it's nice that he looks, sharper and better than he has in the past and maybe a bit more focused and quote-unquote mature. But, I still think this is going to be a year-long battle with, battle might be strong because I think there's room for both of them in the rotation. But him and Norm Powell, it's sort of going to fluctuate who gets more minutes and a bigger role depending on the game. I don't think we're anywhere close to an answer about the backup center minutes. And I think not having Sullinger on the floor makes that sort of observation, very tough to make because I think ideally they'd like to go small with Sullinger at center, but he's not available. So it's been a lot of I still can't say his name properly. Pirtle. Yes, there we go.
Yeah,
it was you who said it's purple, but T instead of the second P, which is just.
I don't know if I said that. There was the one guy who's Austrian at the practice the other day trying to say it to us, but it always just sounds like turtle with a P to me. I know that's not the actual way, so I just try to really dull down that R sound.
Yeah, I think it's a good way to not sound ridiculous is thinking of it the way you do. So I'm gonna go with that for a while. But I don't think there's a clear leader between him and Lucas Nogueira right now. They've both had their highs, they've both had their lows. I think they bring pretty clearly different things to the table.
I'm shocked that 2 very young centers had some highs and lows at the NBA level.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think Bruno has showed that he's ready to, be in the rotation. So there hasn't really been anything surprising, I would say. I think Dwayne Casey's really concerned about the defense. I think
As he should be, probably,
I
because...
understand that. You take the best interior defender and remove him, that puts a lot of pressure on your perimeter defenders, and I think that's going to be one of the interesting things this year, is to watch how Kyle Lowry and DeMarre Carroll and Norm Powell and Corey Joseph adjust to having to be a split second quicker and more reactive, and maybe they have to play more conservative and they have to let more, three-pointers go over them as opposed to really getting up in their faces. So
yeah, I asked Dwayne Casey about that at practice on Tuesday, and the sense was kind of they're not going to tweak anything because no scheme is going to protect you from getting beat at the point of attack, but it might be a case of them sagging off of guys a little bit more and kind of daring the mid-range. They can't really. We know that teams don't have a ton of control over their opponent's three-point field goal percentage, much as they have control over the volume of threes. But the Raptors, they came out on the bad end of opponent three-point percentage last year. If that were to continue, and it has at times in the preseason when starters were on the floor for opposing teams, maybe that's something they'll have to look at too. The toughest thing for me with the defense is, obviously Biyombo's gone, but the starting unit that's going to have Jared Sullinger and Jonas Valanciunas next to each other, as much as that unit is going to absolutely dominate the defensive glass, they're going to work together offensively. I don't have much concern about that. Dwayne Casey has expressed all camp a concern about that transition defense, and while he has sounded confident that he saw enough in that 1 week of training camp and that one exhibition game, that's something I'd kind of like to get a longer look at, and it might be something that we're talking about this a couple weeks into the season still, as the Raptors still kind of figure it out. And to your earlier point about the Powell-Ross battle, the Pirtle-Nogueira battle, I think it's kind of weird where we're sick of the preseason. It's a month in now. We're ready for the season to start. But all the big questions that the Raptors had are kind of still going to linger into the first couple weeks of the season.
And I think that's just the nature of the preseason, because teams are holding so much back, and there's the 15th man battle, which I am not at all invested in not to make light of these people's livelihood, because it's very, very important for all 6 of them. But, it's not something that's going to have a big impact on the Raptors, but they have to give some time to all of these guys, and that makes the looks that you do give, the extended looks you give the centers or Powell and Ross, it changes the nature of them, and you're seeing different players out there too. It's, I think Casey wants to use something closer to a normal rotation in these last 2 preseason games, but you still, you won't have Ross, it sounds like, and probably won't have Sullinger.
Yeah,
so.
Sullinger's not playing Wednesday for sure. They might be able to get him in Friday. Chris O'Leary of the Star tweeted it from shoot-around today. So, there's only so much you can do, right? And on the one hand, you would love to get those reps and get a dress rehearsal of sorts in, but if they did that, everyone would be complaining that they weren't playing it cautious, and if they can get to the opener healthy and everyone can play, that's great. I do think Terrence Ross, the poor guy, man, he comes in, everyone's raving about his change in focus, how good he looks in practice. He has a couple of really good games to start the preseason. And then, doing a 360 dunk when you don't need to is, maybe a little immature. But at the same time, it was an open practice for the fans that the league mandates. And he was trying to, give the fans a big highlight. And it's no different from what guys do in, layup lines and stuff like that. So for that to be the thing that, maybe stalls out his progress, or if he's not ready for opening night, maybe he gets it looked like he had the inside track on the first swing off the bench job. If Norm Powell comes out and he plays really well to start the season, and the thing that got in Ross's way after doing all this stuff right was trying to please the fans who have been so hot and cold on him for 4 years, that would be, that seems unfair when Terrence finally, starts doing things that he's supposed to do to put himself in a position to succeed, for that to be what trips him up.
Absolutely, but at the same time, he's going to get his chance.
Of course.
There are minutes for both he and Norm Powell in this rotation. It will vary by the night, but there's a chance for both of them. And the guy ahead of them, DeMarre Carroll, they're gonna play it cautiously with him. I wouldn't be surprised if some back-to-backs he either doesn't play or plays a lot less. Like it's a long, long season is my point. And it's 82 games. And it's not the worst thing at the beginning of those 82 games with a team that can be reasonably confident that it's going to be in the conversation come February and March and April, for like one of those top 4 seeds and jockeying for that sort of position versus really eking themselves into the playoffs. It's not the worst thing to not have these issues addressed, because what last year does is, I don't think it's false confidence. It gives them some legitimate confidence that, not that they can mess around, but they can use the regular season to search for answers, and they have enough in the tank, and they have enough figured out that they have that leeway.
Yeah, it's nice. It's like, if you want to get down to like why they would be confident or why they can try new things or be cautious or limit workloads and stuff like that, when you won 56 games a year ago and what you do in the regular season doesn't mean a whole lot, you can regress the hell out of that win total and still be in pretty good shape. So, they won 56. Their Pythag said they should have won 53, so maybe you scale it back to 53. Okay, maybe Lowry and DeRozan can't finish both top 12 in minutes. We'll scale it back to 51. Okay, they lost Biyombo. Maybe that costs them a couple games on the defensive end. We'll scale it back to 48. You can kind of chip away at their 56 wins, and they're still going to be in like pretty good shape. So even if you're being very pessimistic or cynical, which neither of us would ever be, they're still going to be pretty comfortably, I think, a playoff team. And then you mentioned being in the mix for the top 4. Let's talk about that quickly. Cleveland is the class of the Eastern Conference. The NBA GM survey that John Schumann does every year for NBA.com just came out yesterday. The Raptors ranked second in the East. GMs were asked to rank the top 4 teams. So the results were Cleveland, Toronto, Boston, Indiana, and then kind of a mess of teams getting a few votes here and there. The Raptors got 60% of the second place votes. Boston got almost everything that was less. Indiana got 1. So it seems GMs at least think Toronto's the second best team in the East. Odds makers have been a little split. Toronto and Boston are even in the Atlantic Division, but Boston has better odds for the championship in the Eastern Conference, I think because of market size factors more than analysis of the two sides. But how do you feel? Do the Raptors care if they end up in the number 2 seed or even the number 1 seed? Will we even know who the second best team in the East is until playoff time?
Oh, I think the answer to your last question is probably no. I think they care. I think there was some talk coming out of shoot-around on Wednesday morning that, they were sort of using it as a slight. I'm not a big believer in that stuff, but it's a long season and you got to find motivation where you can. They finished pretty clearly with the second best record in the conference last year. And I think, in my mind, they go in as the second best team, and it wouldn't surprise me if Boston finishes with a better record than them. It would probably surprise me a bit if anybody else did, but I can see how it's plausible. But I think like Boston and Toronto are the next 2 teams, right? There's reasons to be optimistic about Indiana. There's reasons to be optimistic about, Detroit or Charlotte even. Maybe Washington with a non-terrible coach can have a bounce-back year. But the East got better and deeper in a lot of ways, but I don't think, the balance of talent has really shifted in a meaningful way,
Yeah, let me ask you this. Which gap is bigger? The gap between Cleveland and Toronto and Boston, or the gap between Toronto and Boston and that next tier in the Eastern Conference?
I'd still say between Cleveland and everybody else, but it's just tough to envision that team, assuming LeBron and Kyrie Irving are healthy, not coming out of the conference.
The disrespect you just showed to Steph Curry stopper Kevin Love by not mentioning him.
But we've already seen LeBron get to the conference or the finals without either of them, right? So it's just tougher for me to imagine that rather than, it being a Cleveland-Indiana conference final. So I guess that's where I fall on that, but I'm not, putting down any money on that or anything either. I'd say they're both fairly wide gaps, but Cleveland just seems like the class of the field without much of a second thought about it.
Yeah, plus everyone, or at least the Raptor fans that I've talked to, worry a little bit about Boston adding a piece with their kind of war chest of young players on good contracts and draft picks. Cleveland also has that $10 million trade exception just sitting there, too, that they're going to turn into another, Channing Frye-style rotation player at some point this year. So Cleveland's in a spot where they could always get better, too, which is, super annoying.
Yeah, well, this is the stuff you have to do when LeBron is there and he's, turning 32? He mandates a certain go-for-it style, and it's not, he did the thing that he needed to do and brought a championship there, but you don't mail in seasons when LeBron and close to his prime is there. They've been managed well, and it helps when there is absolutely no fear of going deep into the luxury tax.
Yeah, and flags fly forever. And Dan Gilbert got his money so dishonestly anyway that, let him blow it all to get another flag.
No comment.
We also learned in the NBA general manager survey, by the way, that LeBron James is not actually the Cavs GM because the Air Canada Centre didn't receive one vote for the best home court.
Well, maybe he forgot.
Outrage.
Yeah, I would use that as disrespect. And what is it, the second game of the year that the Cavs are?
I believe so, yeah, the 28th maybe.
Yeah, be extra loud for that one, I guess.
Hashtag prove them. All right, Eric. Anything else? Any thoughts on the season? Anything else you want to plug? Any storylines to watch or, unreasonable takes that you have?
I'm looking forward to the CBA being signed. That'll be good. Yeah.
You know what I'm really looking forward to? Losing 3 days of my life, diving in and trying to see all the changes and figure out what it means for the Raptors cap situation and stuff like that. That's going to be exhausting and a lot of fun. And thank God we have people like Larry Kuhn.
Yeah. As always, Blake, I encourage moderation for you.
Yeah, that's as always, Eric. I'm not going to listen.
Yeah, well, at least I can feel good about myself.
You should.
That seems unlikely, but in this isolated instance, I can feel good about giving you sane advice.
Okay, Eric, thanks so much for coming on. Everyone, you can find Eric at Koreen on Twitter. I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you're already familiar, but his stuff will be up at theathletic.com/Toronto, which you can follow at theathleticto on Twitter as well. I'm Blake Murphy, your host. We'll talk again next week for Raptors Weekly Extra. Eric, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Blake. Enjoy the season, everybody.
Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drop the hoop. Y'all must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the